Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all well. I've had a really great week and are enjoying November, the beautiful month that it is. So this week's question is one that's linked to gender politics and gender identity. So before we all start jumping off a ledge here and going, this is obviously I'm a woman. It's going to be from my perspective and my observations. And at the end of the day, I'm not here to cause controversy, but let's have a little look at this question. And the question that I am posing is based on looking around me and seeing lots of different types of femininity and identities of females. And I want to wonder, that's really badly phrased, but the question I want to pose is, are women losing their identity? We've got so many different types of stereotypes and expectations on us. And as a gender, we really do kind of feel sometimes victimized and like society is against us. And we're seeing, interestingly, some very extreme views and very extreme types of female and femininity and womankind emerging onto the scene. So we're going to sort of go into it a little bit. And this is for anyone who is female presenting, identifies as woman. This is all, we're all included in this narrative that I'm talking about today. And even if you're a man and you're male presenting or male identifying, again, you can have a look into this and think about it. Don't feel excluded from the discussion. Don't feel excluded from the, discourse, because we're trying to get to the bottom of this question and maybe you've got your own ideas and thoughts on it. So I haven't really articulated what this video is about very clearly, but hopefully I will be able to get into a lot more detail. And the big question is, are women losing their identity? So let's go to it and let's get into it. So let's start off with, what type of woman are you? Maternal? Are you hyper feminine? Are you a girl boss? Are you a trad wife? Are you a boundary queen? Are you a stoic high value partner? Are you a crazy lady? Are you a quirky lady? Are you a diva? Are you sassy? I mean, there are so many different ways we can define women, and there are so many different stereotypes out there. Or have you, like most women, probably not really thought about it? Are you just a woman who's trying to navigate her way through the myriad of expectations and demands that are placed on us simply because of our gender? I mean, my role is a mother, I'm a professional, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. But at the core of it, I'm just who I am. And I'm trying to be the best person that I can be. And I don't really try to conform to any particular stereotype here. I'm just winging it the way most of us are. But I suppose how I come across to other people is, very much up to them, isn't it? I mean, this channel is the quirky British female. So two things about me that, or three things that I really want to kind of define myself as being a bit quirky, being British, and being female. So obviously it's a big part of my identity, but what does that look like to other people? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, we all get pigeonholed, don't we? We all get put into certain categories. And equally, I like to think of myself as work in progress. And this is the person that I am at the moment. This is how I represent myself at the moment. But I'm sure if you met me 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 10 years in the future, maybe there will be changes and differences to me, because I'm a constantly evolving and constantly changing person. And that's what we all are, aren't we, really? However, we're living in a world where, women are kind of feeling a bit like confused about where they stand, where they go, where their rights. And I suppose it's really about losing identity, but having identities that are being renegotiated or maybe redefined. So let's sort of look into that and have a think about it. So women are actually living in a world of competing narratives. There's that word. I love the word narrative. So one narrative is telling us that we need to be successful. That's careers, independence, breaking ceilings, being our own person, having our own autonomy. And then there's another one that says success is femininity, nurturing, homemaking, instability. But, I think I represent both of those actually. So the kind of polarity of those narratives doesn't always fit the, realities of the world that we live in. So, when identities are tied to ideals that contradict each other, which they do, some women feel pulled in impossible directions. They can definitely feel like there is a loss of identity. Plus, for women, there are often times when they can lose their identity. maybe in your early 20s and you've like no longer, are surrounded by your peers, you're in a new workplace, you're having to sort of navigate what being a grown up woman is like. Maybe you're a new mother and you feel a loss of identity because you've had children and they've left home. Maybe you're a woman who's single, isn't going to have kids, but has all their friends around them having children and wonders what her definition of femininity or being a woman would feel like. Maybe you're an older woman who is no longer young and is trying to, has a lot of power and a lot of intelligence and wisdom behind her. But, how do you navigate that in the world that we live in? So, yeah, we can be lots of different things, can't we? And the pressure to choose the right kind of womanhood is real. And we all know that there is some kind of ridiculous type of womanhood that seems to be a type that we should all aspire to. But actually, does it even exist? So both sides of the coin can be quite prescriptivist in how they present themselves. So, feminists accuse, trad wives of setting women back and, can you have children? Be successful at work if you're trying to like, serve your husband and all that kind of jazz. And then trad wives equally accuse feminists of destroying femininity and kind of, disempowering men and, not being at home to look after the babies, etc. But fundamentally, it comes down to misogyny, doesn't it? And the misogyny here is that there's a right type of femininity and you're all not conforming to it in whatever perspective that we're looking at this from. So women can end up feeling judged if they want a career, just if they don't want a career, just if they want to stay home, just if they don't want to stay home, just if they want both or neither. We can just be judged. And fundamentally, we like to judge women, don't we? I'm never entirely sure why are we judging women. And maybe men can't handle being judged, but women can. I don't know what the answer to that question is, and we could, debate that for a long time. So the pressure itself erodes our identity because women, someone else is defining it for us. And actually, should we just define it for ourselves? So basically, let's scrap that all off and just be who we're going to be. What do you think? That'd be interesting. So, what's kind of perpetuating this? And I think we all know that it's online aesthetics. There's that word aesthetic. Like the word aesthetic 20 years ago was just to sort of define like how something was styled. And now it seems to be some kind of identity or ideology of its own. So there are lots of online aesthetics that amplify this idea of femininity and being female. And we've got the Pinterest perfect trad wife who like wakes up at 6 in the morning, churns her own butter, bakes baby food from scratch, makes a beautiful home, doesn't work, looks like a doll, etc. And then we've got girl boss hustling with a latte, sticking it to the man, just being her own assertive self. And yeah, they're both highly curated. And I don't think any of them are really there. I don't think that's exactly what they are. I think they are really multifaceted and multi-layered, and there's lots of depth to both of those if we really wanted to look at it. And do real women fit into those images? Well, rarely. I don't think they really do. So I suppose no wonder we're all looking around going, well, what am I supposed to do? Where do I fit into all of this? But I think underlying all of this is the desire to find meaning. And isn't that to be human, to find meaning? So, maybe some women are turning to the more traditional feminine roles because modern work feels soulless. They want community, ritual, purpose, and they're exhausted by the pressure to do it all, actually, because it is exhausting to do it all, as I'm sure many of us know, regardless of our gender. And other women turn to feminism because traditional roles can feel limiting. Why don't we want to power? Why don't we want to lead? Why don't we want to run our own business? Why don't we want to expand our own empire? We want some control, some ambition, some agency, and we don't want to be dependent. Why can't we be independent? For a really long time, women were dependent on men. They couldn't buy houses, couldn't have credit cards, couldn't have bank accounts, couldn't drive cars in some parts of the world. So we really, what's wrong with wanting these things for ourselves? If men are having a good time doing that, why can't we? And yeah, I think that's the fundamental question, isn't it? Like, if it's not harming anybody, let's get to it. Let's be able to do it. But in both cases, women are searching for an identity that they don't want to lose, something that helps to define who they are and make them feel comfortable and familiar in the world that they find themselves living in. So, the identity question is basically, are we looking at a binary opposition here? Are we looking at empowered feminism versus nostalgic trad wife femininity? These are the two polarized versions. And actually, they're absolute extremes. And I think most people will be moderately in the middle. In fact, I think on most things, we're all moderately on the middle. And we don't talk about being moderately in the middle that much anymore, do we? And recently, a statistic has said that only 38% of Britons identify as feminist. And I think feminist has become a loaded and dirty word. Being a feminist does not mean you hate men. I'm a feminist and I love men. I'm raising a son. I'm married to a man. I teach young boys. You know, men are great. I have a dad who's a feminist, so great, good for him. But yeah, I feel that sometimes it's like you can't be a feminist without being a certain aggressive type of feminist. And I think you really can. And this is creating this tension, isn't it? Women are facing conflicting scripts, conflicting messages. Our culture does idealize gender roles and this idea of women as homemakers, maybe because we're not presented with men as homemakers that much. So we kind of default into thinking that's just how it should be. When actually, there are some men that are great homemakers. They want to stay at home, they want to bake the bread, they want to look after the kids. And that's absolutely fine. Maybe this idea of being a bit submissive to your partner, although most men I know don't want you to be submissive. Sometimes they want you to be a bit dominant, if you know what I mean. And strong domestic identity, what does that even mean? But then, feminism pushes for autonomy and equal opportunity. But equal opportunity is about allowing you to do what you want and be who you want. And if you want to be a trad wife, then go for it. That's fine. That's up to you. And the freedom to choose your own path. And that could be including staying at home. And I think feminism is about choice, it's about equality, and it's about equity, and it's about fairness. And it's about being seen, I think. So, I mean, you might argue with me, you might have a different opinion, but in my opinion, that's what feminism is. So, yeah, it's this identity question. Where do we fit in our identity? And I suppose we're going to go and look into that in a little bit more detail. So, what if I told you that your gender is a performance? How would you respond to that? That you are literally performing a gender, that it isn't an innate thing, it's a societal thing. So we're going to reference Judith Butler here, who talked about gender as performance. And Butler says that gender identity isn't fixed, it's constantly made and remade through daily actions. So we reaffirm our gender through how we dress, how we move, how we speak, how we position ourselves socially. So when culture offers competing performances, so we're competing with the trad wife gender performance versus, feminist performance. So we've got soft feminine homemaker versus independent achiever. Women are going to feel pulled between the two scripts, and that's going to make us really struggle with what exactly is a female identity. And the important thing is that it's anything we choose it to be. I think that's what I'm going to take from this. So, according to Butler, gender isn't what we are, it's what we repeatedly do. And it's actually another one of the many constructs that make up our understanding of society and existence. Money is a construct, time is a construct, politics is a construct, gender is a construct. So it's the way we kind of allow ourselves to move and navigate through the world, isn't it? So, what do I mean by this? I think we're performing our gender. Like, actually, today, I'm channeling a little bit of a man vibe. Is that coming across in this video? I'm wearing my husband's navy blue, well, petrol blue, lovely jumper. I'm wearing my nice, lovely, very masculine cut trousers. Yeah, I'm feeling like quite assertive in how I deliver this video. Because actually, I think it's really fun to play around with this kind of gender identity. No, I don't mean like literally moving between, deciding you want to be a different gender here. I'm just talking about actually it's fun to embody characteristics of different gender, isn't it? In my role as a teacher, I like to be assertive, powerful, and strong. So I channel the kind of masculine elements of that. But then when I do deal with the children or reprimand them in some way, then I'm going to be quite nurturing and calm and maternal. So I feel like there's a very blended kind of gender approach in that. And I think it's really interesting that that's what Butler kind of theorized, that gender is a performance and that we choose to perform a version of gender that we want. So men perform to be, a certain gender identity as well. And I think sexuality can intersect here, and we can choose to be different versions based of a gender identity. And yeah, I think this is quite interesting. So if Butler is right, then the question isn't, are women losing their identity, but which performances are women being asked to rehearse and who actually wrote the scripts? So the thing is, though, performance creates identity pressure. And I think that's what is at the heart of this, the pressure to perform, the pressure to be a certain type of female. So, might be struggling in the modern world. It's unstable and exhausting trying to be all of these things, to be this perfect woman that actually doesn't or has never existed. I mean, we know that the physical pressures on women are immense. Like, we're very much judged by how we look and our visuals, aren't we? With before sometimes we get to know our personalities. And women are being asked to juggle multiple contradictory performances. Don't be too soft, don't be too hard, don't be too rough, don't be too, quiet, don't be too outspoken, dress sexy, don't be too sexy. There's just so many things, old and young and be quiet and sit down. It's just so many. So it's just exhausting. And if you're so busy trying to navigate all of that, then actually, yeah, let's just sack it off and be who we want to be and enjoy being the person that we choose to be performing as. So 48% of women say it's harder to be a woman today. So actually, is it more confusing to be a woman today? Women are less comfortable expressing their views online. So actually, our identity is being voiced less or it's being shut down quite quickly. And actually, is this because we're suffering from an identity fatigue? Is it about we're constantly delivering emotional labor and we're giving so much of ourselves because of the gender that we choose to perform that it's just becoming really hard to function? If identity is something we do, it becomes work, and many women feel overworked by the jobs that they're doing. And even think about the trad wife, that is purely a performative type of femininity. Floral dresses, slow living homemaking, 1950s visual cues, submissive communication style, even the type of voice that maybe you use, explicit references to serving your family and being a domestic servant. And this isn't accidental, it's performance as identity making. And that trad wife, it is a performative presentation of a type of femininity, isn't it? So, tradwife content isn't just a lifestyle, it's actually a highly curated gender performance. A return not to the past, but to a visual idea of the past. So maybe we don't necessarily want to be 1950s housewives, but we kind of recognize that form of femininity and being a woman more so than some of the other types that there are in the world today. So I've not just plucked this from, you know, this isn't just vibes. This is actually, some data behind this. So let's have a look at some of the data. It shows that progress isn't linear and that identity and work or role is still contested. Are we still being put up against these challenges? And around 48% of the UK public say it's harder to be a woman than a man today, while only about 14% say the opposite. That's a big gap, isn't it? So among women aged 16 to 29, the figure jumps to 68. So our young women are the women that are experiencing the difficulty, it would seem. So between the ages of 16, sorry, and 29, the figure jumps up to 68%. Say it's harder to be a woman than a man. That hurts my feelings a little bit. But I kind of see this in school. See this. I mean, young boys are becoming quite misogynistic. And we all know why this is. Exposure on the internet, the manosphere, toxic people like Andrew Tate are very, influential and impressionable to young boys who are struggling with their own identity. And sometimes that's sort of manifested itself in some extremely misogynistic and sexist views. So yeah, I can see how that's sort of come about. And it highlights that many women feel gender roles and expectations are heavier today, which ties into this identity stress. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to think about that. The actual world that we live in isn't great. And I suppose a big question is, why has this trad wife movement resurged? Why are we harking back to the time period like the 1950s, the trad wife movement really is viral on social media, even on TikTok. The hashtag trad wife, it yields tens of thousands of videos and influencers like Estee Williams, who defines, sorry, a trad wife as women who prefers a traditional role, including beliefs that a woman's place is in the home, and that's from people.com. So there's a clear cultural example of how identity gets packaged, aestheticized, and idealized. And that's the big word here, this idealization. There is no trad wife. It doesn't exist. And I don't think it did exist. I just think that's what women did in the context that they found themselves living in the 1950s. And then, 60s and 70s. We were an evolving, changing thing. If you remember the beginning of this video, we don't have to be defined by the past. We can live in the modern era and choose for ourselves. And that's important, isn't it? So, why does feminism feel uncertain today? So, I suppose feminism is bringing a lot of tension to some people, maybe. It's splintered into many forms. There's intersectional, liberal, radical, aesthetic, corporate feminism, all these different types of feminism within different environments. And I suppose not all women see themselves, identifiable within it. They don't see themselves reflected. And structural progress has slowed. And I've just talked about, like, leadership gaps. Where are these women, girl bosses, CEOs, leaders? Like, they're not always in the companies that we work for. And that's disappointing, isn't it? And young women report lower alignment with binary gender norms. They don't actually feel that they want to align with traditional female roles, maybe. And then these make feminists a harder identity to inhabit because they don't actually see themselves strictly following, the ideas of feminism and femininity. And another statistic, as I've said, that I referenced earlier, is that 38% of Britons now say they identify as a feminist, and that's down from 43% in 2024. And among men, it's even lower. So men can be feminists. You can. Thank you if you are. And that's 28% of men identify as feminists in the UK today. And women, it's 48%. And King's College London are responsible for that statistic. And it shows how even the term feminist is under pressure, negotiation in public identity. So we're obviously going through something at the moment, aren't we? Oh, let's look at how we can move beyond the discourse and rebuild a grounded identity. So, how do we make our own identity? Well, we've always had that power to do. You have that power. You don't have to be anything other than what you want to be and conform to what you want. And you just need to be able to be comfortable and sit in your truth. And if both sides of the gender polarity battle here are performances, then real real identity comes from values and lived experience, which is something that I commonly say. And so I suppose this is what Butler helps us to see. If gender is performed, then women can choose which parts to keep and drop. We can all choose which parts to keep and drop. So, how do we do this exactly? So, how do we help curate our own identity? How do we put together our own sense of identity? Well, first of all, let's detach from identity stereotypes. So let's scrap the aesthetics and start to peel away who you really are and what you really care about. What are your interests? What motivates you? What brings you alive? What parts of any identity template feel like you? And which ones feel a bit performative? You can get rid of those ones then, can't you? Shift from ideology to an embodied experience. So, ideologies speak in absolutes, whereas your body and lived experience speak in more nuance. Isn't that what this is about? Things are far less black and white and clear cut than maybe we make them out to be. As I've said, when I'm in my teaching persona, I've got this blend of masculine and feminine. It's very nuanced what exactly I do when I am embodying this person. And I suppose gender is, how someone else chooses to interpret me in that moment is up to them, isn't it? So notice where you feel expanded versus constricted. Track what social roles energize you and which drain you. If you don't want to be hyper feminine, don't do it. If you don't want to be all casual and, like, girl bossing, You don't have to. Pay attention to how you behave when you're not performing for an audience. So when you just relax yourself, what does that look like? And think about, rather than thinking about who you should be, think about, who am I? Do you actually know who you are? Are you comfortable with who you are? Get to know the person that you are. So build identity. There's a number three, from your values, not from external approval. And this is a hard one. I think human beings are naturally social animals, and we do seek validation, especially in the world of social media, from other people. But actually, a grounded sense of self is value led rather than discourse led. So, values might include your autonomy, your stability, your creativity, your intimacy, your sense of adventure, your nurturing side, your purpose. All of these things can help you, the values that you choose to align yourself with. No ideology can tell you your hierarchy or values, can it? So, no ideology can dictate these things for you. It's up to you to decide what you believe and what you seek. So think about questions like, what do I protect fiercely? What do I consistently return to? What would I choose if no one was watching? And what do I envy in others? Envy as a compass, not as a tool for being jealous and, brutal, but actually for kind of figuring out what it is you want out of life. And develop discourse immunity. This is an important one and incredibly hard in the era of social media. This is a skill of recognizing when a conversation is trying to frame your identity for you. Signals you're losing your groundedness could be feeling victimized, feeling unseen, feeling that you're not conforming to somebody else's idea or stereotype. So we're going to scrap that off. We're going to be who we're going to be, and we're going to be comfortable with that. And use relationships as identity anchors. Who are the people around you? How do they see you? How do you respond to each other? And define success in a way that feels human and not ideological. So, if tradwife culture says success is female domesticity, maybe feminism says success is ambition and independence. You should scrap that off and decide that the grounded reality is whatever leads to a flourishing and coherent life is truly the best way of being. And I happen to agree with that. Create your own identity and definition of success. A successful life for me is one that is fulfilling and happy and sees me progress and achieve goals. And that has nothing to do with female domesticity, ambition, and independence. I can separate myself from both of those, although part of them might be part of my idea of success. And I love this one because this is very true. Allow yourself to be contradictory. Yay! We are a big fat bag of contradictions, aren't we? You want a career and a nurturing relationship. Let's have both. You want to be fiercely independent but desire protection at times. You enjoy domesticity and reject, traditional female roles or traditional gender roles. You value softness, but you will stand your ground. And when you allow complexity, eternal discourse loses its power over you, and you can be comfortable in who you are. We can be multifaceted. We don't have to sing from the same hymn sheet. We can take bits and pieces from all parts of on all walks of life and create our own identity that we're comfortable in. And groundedness is easier when your life has texture and rhythm. So create your little rituals that root you and help you feel anchored to your own identity. That could be writing a journal, going for walks, cooking with intentionality, grounding exercise, journaling, dancing around like a loon to music, playing a sport, whatever gets you going. And these remind your nervous system that your identity exists in the physical world and not just the ideological one. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up there. So hopefully I've given a bit of clarity about are women losing their identity? Potentially they might be, but actually we can get our own identities back. And I think the whole point here is that we don't need to subscribe to a different or a particular type of feminism. You can be clever and pretty. You can be dominant and nurturing. You can be traditional and modern. We can embrace as many different things as we want. So, if gender is a performance, why are we letting algorithms and cultural write our line? So, let's be who we're going to be and decide for ourselves. So, identity isn't really being lost, it's being crowded by competing performances. So, we need to choose our own performance and not be kind of dictated to by algorithms or representations of femininity that maybe aren't always serving us or even reflecting who we really are. So, what do you think about what I've talked about today? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel like we're kind of, all this gender politics and confusion around what exactly femininity and woman should be? I mean, think about that Jeff Bezos rocket and going up into space and the kind of stigma around, what did that do for feminism and what did that do for women? And was it just tokenism? I mean, what exactly what are we trying to say? What is the world coming to? What do we stand for? What do women represent? And at the end of the day, I don't think we should be looking at things through a gendered lens. Ha! The big irony here is that we should be looking at the human being lens and the different aspects of being who we are and our different types of personal qualities and our cultural experiences and the context that we find ourselves in and the relationships that we form. So maybe we shouldn't even be looking at it through the lens of gender. Maybe we should just be embracing who we are and the individuals we are and all the little nuances that go within it. So I'm ending it there, guys. Let me know your thoughts as always. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share your own ideas. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Ta ta for now. Bye.